Welcome back with another exciting video. Enjoy watching and don't forget to like and leave a comment.
What if one of the most terrifying true stories in American history was hidden for decades? Not because it was fake, but because nobody could explain what really happened. What if deep inside the isolated wilderness of the United States, an entire group of experienced people vanished under impossible circumstances, leaving behind evidence so disturbing that even investigators refused to talk about it publicly? And what if the few survivors who escaped the nightmare spent the rest of their lives terrified of the dark, convinced that something ancient was still watching them from the forest? Tonight's story is not just another horror tale. It is based on real reports, forgotten records, eyewitness accounts, and one of the strangest mysteries ever connected to the American wilderness. This is the terrifying mystery of Hollow Creek. In the winter of 1978, a small research team traveled deep into the remote forests near the border of Montana and Idaho. The region was already feared by locals for decades. Hunters avoided it. Campers disappeared there without explanation. Strange sounds echoed through the valleys at night, and old residents whispered stories about shadows moving between the trees long before modern America even existed. Most people dismissed those stories as legends, but that changed after the Hollow Creek expedition. The team consisted of 7 people: wildlife researchers, survival experts, and 2 former military guides who knew the mountains better than anyone else. Their mission sounded simple. They were sent to investigate unusual animal migration patterns reported near an abandoned mining area hidden deep within the forest. For months, locals had reported seeing deer running out of the woods in massive groups in the middle of the night. Some animals appeared injured, terrified, and disoriented. Some hunters claimed they heard screams unlike anything they had ever heard before. Not animal screams, human screams. The government officially blamed predators and harsh weather conditions, but behind closed doors, authorities quietly funded the research trip after several emergency radio signals had been detected from an area where nobody was supposed to be living. The expedition entered the forest on November 14, 1978. That was the last normal day of their lives. At first, everything seemed ordinary. The team established a temporary camp near Hollow Creek, a freezing river that cut through miles of dense pine forest. Temperatures dropped rapidly after sunset, and thick fog rolled through the valley every night. One member of the team, Robert Hale, kept detailed audio recordings during the expedition. Those recordings would later become some of the most disturbing evidence investigators ever recovered. On the second night, Robert reported hearing footsteps outside the tents around 2:13 a.m. Not animal footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate footsteps. At first, the group assumed it was a bear, but when they checked outside, they found something impossible. There were footprints in the snow, human footprints, bare human footprints. The problem was the temperature outside had dropped far below freezing. No normal person could walk barefoot through the snow for long without severe injury. Yet the footprints continued for almost half a mile before suddenly stopping in the middle of an open field. No return tracks, no signs of struggle, nothing. The guides immediately wanted to leave the area, but the expedition leader insisted on continuing the mission. He believed they were dealing with a dangerous drifter or a survivalist hiding in the mountains. That decision would destroy almost everyone involved. Over the next few days, strange events intensified. Food supplies began disappearing during the night. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Radios produced bursts of static mixed with what sounded like distant whispering.
One researcher claimed he saw a tall figure standing between the trees, watching the camp shortly before dawn. When the team searched the area, they found no one, but they did find more footprints. Again, barefoot, again leading nowhere. On November 19th, the expedition discovered the abandoned mining tunnel hidden beneath the side of a mountain near Hollow Creek. According to old records, the mine had been shut down in the 1930s after multiple workers disappeared underground. Official reports blamed toxic gas leaks and unstable tunnel collapses, but locals told a different story. The miners had supposedly uncovered something deep beneath the mountain, something they were never meant to find. The entrance to the mine was partially collapsed, but someone had recently cleared a narrow path inside. Fresh marks covered the rocks. It looked as if people, or something, had been entering the mine very recently. Against the advice of the guides, the team decided to explore. The deeper they went underground, the stranger things became. The air felt unnaturally cold. Not normal cold, a heavy, suffocating cold that made breathing difficult. Several flashlights began flickering, even though their batteries were new. One audio recorder captured a low humming sound echoing through the tunnel, though nobody remembered hearing it at the time. Then they found the chamber. Hidden nearly a mile underground was a massive open space unlike anything shown on the original mining maps. The walls were covered in strange symbols carved directly into the stone. Some appeared ancient, others looked almost burned into the surface. In the center of the chamber stood what looked like a crude circle made of bones, animal bones and human bones. The team immediately panicked. One guide demanded they leave at once. Another member became physically sick after noticing several old mining helmets scattered near the walls. Inside one of the helmets was a human skull. But the most disturbing discovery was still waiting. Robert Hale later described hearing movement behind them inside the darkness of the cave. At first, he thought another team member was walking nearby. Then, his flashlight revealed something standing near the far side of the cave. A tall figure, extremely thin, pale skin, long arms, and completely motionless. Nobody could clearly see its face. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then, the creature suddenly disappeared into the darkness without making a sound. The team fled the mine in total panic. But when they reached the surface, one member of the expedition was missing, Daniel Mercer. At first, they believed he had become separated during the escape. The guides organized an immediate search despite worsening weather conditions. They never found him. What they did find terrified them even more. About 200 yards from the mine entrance, searchers discovered Daniel's jacket hanging from a tree nearly 15 feet above the ground. There were no climbing marks, no blood, no footprints, nothing. That night, the remaining team members locked themselves inside their camp and prepared to leave at sunrise. But around 3 a.m., the screaming began. Multiple members later described hearing Daniel's voice outside the camp, calling for help from the forest. He sounded terrified, cold, in pain, but something felt wrong. One guide noticed the voice never moved naturally through the trees. It sounded almost identical each time, repeating the same phrases again and again. "Help me, please let me in, I can't see." The team refused to open the tents. Then came the scratching. Long scraping sounds circled the camp for hours. Something moved slowly around them in the darkness just beyond the firelight. Robert later admitted he could hear breathing directly outside his tent, even though nobody was visible. At sunrise, the camp looked completely untouched, except for one thing. Every tent was surrounded by barefoot footprints, hundreds of them. The expedition abandoned the mission immediately and attempted to hike back toward the nearest ranger station, nearly 20 miles away. But the forest itself seemed wrong. Compasses stopped functioning properly. Familiar landmarks appeared different. Several team members claimed they were hearing whispers coming from the trees, even during daylight. Then, another person disappeared. This time, it was one of the military guides. 1 second, he was walking beside the group. The next second, he was gone. No scream, no struggle, just gone. Panic completely consumed the survivors.
By the second night during their escape, paranoia had reached terrifying levels. Some members believed they were being hunted. Others became convinced the forest itself was somehow alive. Robert's final audio recording was recovered months later by investigators. The recording lasted nearly 17 minutes. For most of it, only heavy breathing and footsteps could be heard. Then, a voice whispered directly into the microphone. A voice that did not belong to anyone on the expedition. Investigators later confirmed something horrifying. The whisper seemed to mimic Robert's own voice. The final words on the recording were chilling. "It knows us now." After that, the tape abruptly ended. 3 days later, search and rescue teams finally located the remains of the expedition camp nearly 30 miles from its original location. The scene made no sense. Tents had been ripped apart from the inside, supplies were scattered everywhere, several radios had been smashed deliberately. Yet, there were very few signs of animal attacks. Only 2 survivors were ever found alive, Robert Hale and a researcher named Emily Carter. Both were discovered wandering near a highway in severe shock, dehydrated and barely able to speak. Authorities immediately sealed all official reports connected to the incident. But leaked documents and witness interviews later revealed disturbing details. Emily Carter reportedly refused to sleep in darkness for the rest of her life. She claimed she could still hear footsteps outside her home at night, years after the expedition ended. Robert Hale became increasingly paranoid and isolated after the incident. According to friends, he constantly believed someone or something was watching him nearby forests. In 1987, Robert disappeared completely during a solo camping trip in Oregon. His body was never found. The Hollow Creek region was quietly closed to public access shortly afterward. Official explanations blamed dangerous environmental conditions and unstable mining structures. But locals continued sharing terrifying stories. Hunters reported hearing human voices deep within empty valleys. Campers described seeing pale figures standing between trees at night before vanishing seconds later. Several missing persons cases were later connected to areas surrounding Hollow Creek, though authorities denied any direct link. Then came the strangest discovery of all. In 2004, a group of urban explorers illegally entered the restricted zone, searching for the abandoned mine. They carried cameras, GPS equipment, and satellite communication devices. Only one of them returned. The survivor later told investigators that during the second night, they heard someone walking around their campsite outside the forest. At first, they assumed it was another hiker. Then, one member realized the footsteps sounded barefoot. The survivor claimed they later saw a tall, pale figure standing near the trees, watching them silently, before all communication devices suddenly failed. The next morning, the rest of the group was gone. No bodies were ever recovered. Police dismissed the story publicly, but unofficial reports revealed investigators found hundreds of barefoot prints surrounding the abandoned campsite, exactly like the original Hollow Creek expedition.
Even today, former rangers and locals avoid speaking openly about the area. Some believe the mine uncovered something ancient buried beneath the mountains long before modern civilization existed. Others think the strange events were connected to psychological breakdowns caused by isolation and fear. But skeptics struggle to explain the missing people, the footprints, the recordings, and the fact that similar stories have continued for decades. Because sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are not the ones proven false. They are the ones nobody can explain at all. And somewhere deep within the forests near Hollow Creek, many believe something is still waiting in the darkness, watching. What if the nightmare at Hollow Creek never truly ended? What if the terrifying events of 1978 were only the beginning of something far darker, something that had already been happening for centuries beneath the forgotten wilderness of America? And what if hidden government files later revealed that people had been disappearing near Hollow Creek long before the mine was ever discovered? Because after the surviving members of the expedition vanished from public life, authorities believed the mystery would slowly fade away. Instead, the horror only grew worse. In early 1979, just months after the disaster, federal investigators secretly returned to Hollow Creek under strict orders to recover any remaining evidence from the abandoned research site. Unlike the original expedition, this team was heavily equipped. They carried military radios, advanced navigation equipment, emergency weapons, and detailed maps of the region. Their mission sounded simple: enter the restricted area, recover the missing research materials, seal the mine permanently, leave before nightfall. But according to leaked documents released decades later, the team encountered something that completely changed the investigation forever. The operation began normally. Snow still covered much of the valley, and temperatures remained dangerously low. Helicopters dropped the recovery unit nearly 5 miles from the abandoned camp because thick fog made direct landing impossible. From the moment they entered the forest, several agents reported an overwhelming feeling of being watched. At first, commanders ignored the complaints. But then, strange problems began appearing almost immediately. Compasses spun in random directions. Radio signals cut in and out without explanation. And several men complained about hearing distant voices echoing through the trees despite nobody being nearby. One investigator later wrote something disturbing in his field notes. "The forest feels wrong, not silent, listening." Around noon, the team finally reached the remains of the original expedition camp. What they found shocked everyone. Despite months of harsh winter weather, many objects remained strangely untouched. Torn tents still stood partially upright. Rusted cooking equipment lay scattered across the frozen ground. One flashlight recovered at the scene still contained working batteries. But the strangest discovery involved the footprints. Fresh, barefoot tracks surrounded the old campsite. Fresh. Investigators immediately realized the tracks could not belong to the original missing team members. Snowfall from previous weeks should have buried any old markings completely. Yet, the prints looked recent. Some even appeared on top of freshly fallen snow. The recovery unit prepared to leave immediately after documenting the evidence. But before they could retreat, one member noticed movement between the trees. A pale figure, tall, thin, standing completely still about 50 yards away. At first, investigators believed it was a lost hiker. Then, the figure suddenly stepped behind a tree and disappeared. Several agents searched the area, but found nothing, except more barefoot tracks leading deeper into the forest. Against protocol, the commanding officer decided to follow them. That decision became one of the biggest mistakes in the history of the Hollow Creek investigation. The tracks led towards the abandoned mining tunnel discovered during the original expedition. Snow near the entrance had been disturbed recently, as if multiple people had entered the mine only hours earlier. Inside, investigators found something impossible. The bone circle inside the underground chamber had changed. Additional bones now surrounded the center structure. Some appeared fresh. Worse still, several missing items from the original expedition had somehow been carefully arranged around the chamber walls. Daniel Mercer's damaged flashlight, a torn backpack,
Robert Hale's audio recorder. Objects belonging to people who were never officially recovered. Then, one of the investigators noticed something carved into the stone wall. Words, dozens of words, repeated over and over again in uneven handwriting. Don't follow the voices. It wears our faces. It waits below. Panic spread quickly through the team. Several agents demanded immediate evacuation. But before they could leave, every flashlight inside the chamber suddenly went dark at the exact same moment. Complete darkness swallowed the cave. Then came the sound. Breathing, slow, heavy, very close. One investigator later testified that he could hear footsteps circling the team inside the darkness, even though nobody could see anything. Another claimed he heard his own voice whispering from somewhere deeper inside the mine. Then someone screamed. Gunshots echoed through the chamber. When emergency lights finally activated seconds later, one investigator was missing. There was no blood, no struggle, nothing except his rifle lying on the cave floor. The team fled the mine immediately, but the nightmare had only begun. As they attempted to retreat through the forest, weather conditions became dangerously severe. Thick fog rolled between the trees so heavily that visibility dropped to only a few feet. Several agents later described seeing human-shaped figures moving silently inside the fog around them, sometimes close, sometimes far away, always watching. Then the voices returned. At first, investigators heard random whispers. Soon the whispers became clearer. Some sounded like missing expedition members. Others sounded like friends or family members waiting somewhere in the darkness. One terrified agent reportedly attempted to follow the voices before being physically restrained by another team member. That same night, disaster struck again. While setting up a temporary emergency camp, guards noticed movement near the edge of the trees surrounding their position. Multiple pale figures stood silently in the darkness. Nobody could clearly see their faces. Witnesses later claimed the figures appeared unnaturally tall and thin, with arms hanging far below normal human proportions. The creatures never attacked directly. They only watched. For hours. Then, shortly before sunrise, one figure suddenly mimicked the voice of the missing investigator perfectly. It called out for help from the forest. Several agents nearly panicked after hearing the exact same phrases recorded during the original 1978 incident. The commanding officer ordered everyone to ignore the voices. That decision probably saved lives. At daylight, the team finally escaped Hollow Creek and reported everything to federal authorities. What happened next remains one of the most controversial parts of the mystery. According to leaked records, government officials immediately classified the entire operation. Witnesses were ordered to remain silent. Reports were altered. Several documents disappeared completely. Officially, Hollow Creek no longer existed. Maps of the region were quietly changed over time. Warning signs appeared around surrounding forest areas claiming dangerous environmental hazards.
But rumors continued spreading among nearby towns. Locals spoke of missing hikers, hunters vanishing without explanation, and strange lights appearing near the mountains late at night. Then came the tragedy of 1986. A group of 4 college students entered the restricted Hollow Creek region while filming a documentary about unsolved American mysteries. They ignored local warnings and planned to spend 3 nights near the abandoned mining area. Only fragments of their footage were ever recovered. The tape begins normally. The students laugh while hiking through the forest. They joke about ghost stories and government conspiracies. One member even mocks the old Hollow Creek legends directly into the camera. But as night falls, the mood changes completely. The recovered footage later became infamous among investigators because of what appears in the background during several scenes. Tall figures standing silently between trees, almost impossible to notice unless viewed carefully. The students themselves never seemed aware of them. On the second night, the camera captured audio of footsteps circling the campsite outside their tents. Bare footsteps, slow, deliberate. Then, one student whispers something terrifying. Why does it sound like there are so many of them? Minutes later, a voice calls from the darkness, a female voice, crying for help. The students initially believe another hiker is lost nearby, but one girl suddenly becomes hysterical after recognizing the voice. It sounded exactly like her sister. Her sister was hundreds of miles away at home. The final minutes of footage are chaotic. The camera shakes violently while people scream and run through darkness. Flashlights swing wildly between trees. Strange noises echo through the forest. Then, for less than 2 seconds, the camera captures something horrifying directly ahead. A pale, human-like face staring from the darkness, its eyes reflecting light unnaturally, its mouth stretched into an impossible expression. Then the footage abruptly ends. The students disappeared without a trace. Search teams found their abandoned campsite 3 days later. Just like every previous incident, investigators discovered hundreds of barefoot footprints surrounding the area, but no bodies were ever recovered. Years later, former investigators began privately comparing Hollow Creek to ancient Native American legends connected to the region. Some tribal stories warned about creatures living beneath the mountains long before settlers arrived in America. Beings capable of copying human voices, luring people into darkness, watching from forests at night. According to some legends, certain caves and underground systems were considered forbidden places where the Hollow Ones lived beneath the earth. Whether those stories were connected to Hollow Creek remains unknown, but one detail disturbed investigators more than anything else. The descriptions matched perfectly. Even today, satellite maps show strange gaps and restricted sections surrounding parts of Hollow Creek wilderness. Former rangers refuse to patrol certain areas after sunset. Hunters still report hearing voices calling from deep inside the forest where nobody should be. And every few years, another disappearance is quietly added to the growing list connected to the region. No explanation, no evidence, only silence. Because somewhere beneath the mountains of Hollow Creek, many believe something ancient still survives, something intelligent, something patient. And, according to the final classified report leaked anonymously in 1998, investigators reached one terrifying conclusion. Whatever exists inside Hollow Creek does not hunt people for food. It hunts them to imitate them.